quite a sheltered upbringing, because I can remember the first time I saw a beggar. It was when my husband Marty and I were on our big OE 40 years ago. Part of our travels included a guided tour of Europe, and during this we visited Monaco. Our tour group was given some free time, which we used to walk through the streets, making our way down to the beach. Needless to say, we were impressed by all the signs of wealth, from the opulent shops to the magnificent buildings and the many luxurious yachts in the harbour. In the midst of this, sitting on the pavement, we passed a young woman holding a sign that simply said, "J'ai faim," which I, with my schoolgirl French, knew translated as, "I am hungry." This was an unexpected sight in the midst of all the signs of an affluent country, so much so it stayed in my mind more than anything else that we saw in that place. And at that time, I would never have expected that it would become a common occurrence in my own country. The story that Jesus told, which would have resonated with his listeners because they lived with extremes of poverty and wealth, would once have been rather foreign to us. The story of a rich man with a beggar at his gate. We would not have pictured someone able to afford such clothing, probably the equivalent of today's designer clothing, and yet having such extravagant food while in plain sight at his front gate, someone made the street their home. Now, unfortunately, it has become a common sight as society has regressed to have those extremes of wealth and poverty that were common in the time when the story of the rich man and Lazarus was told. We are told that the gap between rich and poor continues to increase, and indeed we see the evidence of it around us all too often. In spite of the setting for the story, I don't think that the main point is that rich people won't get to heaven. As we heard from the epistle reading, it is the love of money that draws people into selfishness and greed. When we use it to help others into fullness of life, then it is a force for good. It is falling in love with money and all it can buy, including influence and power, that people become self-absorbed and greedy, and that leads to the exploitation of others for their own advantage. When we are out to make all we can for ourselves, the needs of others don't figure in our thoughts or in our planning. So if the point of the story is not a warning about punishment in the life after this one, then what is it? Well, for me, it is an encouragement to live life to the fullest that we are able. The rich man didn't do that in spite of his wealth, or perhaps because of it. Rather, he led a sheltered, blinkered life that showed him only what he wanted to see. And that certainly didn't include anything that would offend him or challenge him to change his ways and share his fortune. Every time he went in and out of his luxury home, there was Lazarus at the gate, always in need of help. He was aware of who he was. He knew him by name, and his situation was obvious, and yet he gave no thought to helping him. After they both died, he still considered Lazarus to be of less importance than himself, someone to be sent on an errand for water, or as a messenger to warn his brothers about the perils of the lifestyle they were living. The chasm between the two men was one that couldn't be crossed. It was between them in life as well as in death. In life, the rich man made no effort to overcome it in order to ease Lazarus's suffering. That chasm was made up of selfishness, greed, ignorance, abuse, self-indulgence, and failure to engage in order to live out the scriptural injunctions of Moses and the prophets. It was also caused by that love of money that St. Paul spoke of. The rich man may not have been deliberately evil, but he caused harm to others by failing to act when he had the means to do so. How could the rich man have overcome the differences that were between himself and Lazarus? And how do we ensure that there are no chasms between us and those around us when we have the means to bridge them? Again, we can refer to Paul, who wrote to Timothy of the imperative to pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Abraham will not allow Lazarus to be sent on a mission of warning. He says that in the law that God gave through Moses, and in the warnings of the prophets in the years since, the brothers have available to them all the teaching that they need about how to live. If they don't heed that, then nothing else will influence them. We are in the position of the brothers of the rich man, at whom the story is aimed. We, along with the community that Luke was writing for, know the law that is contained in the Old Testament, which we know as the Ten Commandments. We have the teaching of the prophets, who continually warned people about the risks of departing from God's teaching into a life dominated by selfish desires at the cost of justice and the needs of others. Those prophets then called them back into a closer relationship with God, which also meant being in a healthy and reciprocal relationship with other people, including those in need of help. And that is all of us at some time. We are encouraged to take heed of those teachings and warnings while living in the light of Jesus' resurrection. When we gather for worship, we can receive forgiveness for those things to which we have closed our eyes and which have subsequently led to a guilt which weighs us down. We share in the meal that Jesus gave us, in which we are strengthened as a community. And we listen to the scriptures and consider how they apply to our lives here and now. All of these encourage us to be what God created us to be, and all of them offer abundant life in God. Abundant life that enables us not to be afraid of what might happen, but to cope with both good and bad times, and be reassured that we will be not left to face them alone. Part of that abundance is the joy of living as part of a church community where faith is the bond that holds us in common. Because God calls us to live in community, to look out for each other, and to share our time, talents, and our wealth. Furthermore, we are called to challenge unjust structures and organisations and governments who abuse their power and allow those extremes of poverty and wealth to develop. When we live by the law, the prophets, and the light of Jesus' death and resurrection, we have lives that are more meaningful, that contain more joy, and that bring a sense of purpose. We saw that young woman that was begging in the streets in Monaco again. It was a little later in the day and she'd obviously been given enough money to buy some food. She walked onto the beach carrying a loaf of bread and looking for somewhere to sit and satisfy her hunger. As we come to share in the bread of communion, may we commit ourselves to looking out for those who are hungry for meaning and abundance in their lives, and tell them about the fullness that we find in Christ. Furthermore, let us then invite them to come and share in this life here with us, so that no one is left to sit and beg at a gate while we have resources to share, and no one is left to lament the chasm that separates them from God while we call ourselves God's people.
Please stand as we join in the affirmation of faith on page 8. You, oh God.